everybody and welcome to the GL Assessment Year 5 homework review video. This is for Block 3, Week 4, where we're going to be going over the non-verbal reasoning homework. My name is Luke Lloyd. Let's get straight into it. So starting first, we have the Lesson 5 from the Practice and Pass Non-Verbal Reasoning book, and we're doing pages 69 through to 83. The book looks like this. I do want to just take a little moment just to quickly pre-teach and just talk about how we approach these questions. These are matrices style questions or grid style questions. It can go by either name. And generally speaking, we have some very simple tips. First thing is to look for one feature at a time. And what do I mean by feature? Well, really, it's your Spanseros features. So let me just list that out at the top for you. So SPANSSROS. And I'm sure if you've been a teacher for a while now, you've learned your Spanseros. These are things like shape, position, angle, number, size, symmetry, rotation, overlap, and shading. And these are the features you're going to be considering or looking for. Remember, of course, a lot of the skills you might have learned if you did sequences apply here. So you're still considering one thing at a time. You want to try and look either across the rows or down the diagonals or down the columns. Focus on one thing at a time and work out, for example, in this picture here, I might work out that, yeah, I'm pretty confident that the arrows are rotating around the center. So I want to see these two arrows looking like this. And so if any of these didn't have arrows in that direction, I would cross them out. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick another feature. Well, I'm expecting there to be a circle in the opposite corner that's shaded in dark. So let's put that there. Notice how I'm sketching the things I've worked out one at a time. And now I've made some progress. I can eliminate a few more options. In fact, I can eliminate 3 options, which is fantastic because it brings it down to 50-50. Once you're at the stage where you're at the 50-50, I would then directly compare these two. So if we look at C and D, I can ask myself, well, what is the difference? It's the difference is there a black dot in the bottom left corner or a white circle in the bottom left corner? And then you can go back and look at the picture and say, well, actually, look here, I think we're getting some sort of reflection. So we're getting cross, cross. So technically white dot, white dot. So finally, I want to see something like this with a white circle in the middle. And that then leads me to eliminate the final shape. So again, we want to see lots of elimination with these questions. I want to see you using your Spanseros features with these. And again, please don't be afraid if you need to, sketch features out one at a time. This should be here, that should be there. And then based on your sketch, you can eliminate really accurately. So those are some recommendations. Obviously, the thing that I'm going to be doing to reveal these answers to you for the remainder of the question is actually just showing you how in the slot each of these, so I bring this forward, how each of it actually fits. I think that's quite nice because you can really visualize why the answers we say are correct. And hopefully you can see here how the pattern works and that you're reflecting certain things and rotating others. Right, guys, with that, I think we'll jump straight in now to the quick answer section. And then if you want to just quickly run through a more detailed rundown, we'll do that now. So pause for the quick answers. And here come the answer explanations in full. So looking here, the correct answer for what goes in the spot is this. And hopefully you can see it's a rotation pattern where each of these is rotating around the inside. So we're just looking at continuing that pattern on. So the answer there is B. For number 2, if we look, this is being reflected. So the top to bottom is being reflected. So we need to have simply a reflection. And you can see these two are on the inside. Now these two are on the outside. Circle on the inside, circle on the outside. The one thing, though, that has not been reflected, and this is a really important look, is inside the circle, it stayed the same. So we've kept our inside the circle the same. And that's why the answer is D, as opposed to ones that are very close, like B. That's the primary distance. So if you did go with B, unlucky, you just got bamboozled by that one little fact. The circle has not been reflected where everything else has. Number 3, again, if we look, here's our answer. And there are certain patterns of features, so you can see that arrow from the middle we could have sketched in. And actually, again, this is a really nice thing where you're rotating around the circle or reflecting. Both, in fact, both interpretations work. It has been rotated and it is a reflection in multiple axes. That's 3A. Number 4 then, we can look at this option. So obviously put this in here. And you can see, again, we're reflecting certain features within this grid of dot, blank, and X. That's get reflected. But the outside lines have stayed in the same direction. So you see these little plungers have stayed. So we're keeping our plungers the same and only reflecting the interior. And that's why the option number 4 is D. Number 5, this is another one where we're sort of mirroring images. So again, just to show you how I might go about approaching this, I might sketch in there that feature, which again, I know the majority of them have, but again, it still lets us select one option. And in terms of the rest, you can hopefully see if I fill this in, that we've got a rotation of this sort of skewer, always pointing in that direction, rotating around and maintaining the same pattern of circle, square, circle, square, circle, square. That's why the option was D. And of course the dot in the opposite corner, but I'm sure we knew that. Number 6, we've got the reflection of the outside shape along this time, sort of this axis here. So there's your line of reflection. That's why it's option E, but then just keeping the same cross-hatching colors. It doesn't come out particularly clearly in my snippet, but in your book you can see the shading here matches for each. That's why it's E over D, for example. Number 7, again, I just put this into place here. You can see we've kept the same features as the top one. We just have a smaller shaded version in the middle. So it's exactly the same as this, but with a shaded smaller outline in the center. That's why it's option B. For option 8, this time we want the same outside shape, so the same pentagon, but it's going from a straight line to dotty. So we go from top to bottom. The line that's dotted and lines that are thick swap. So you can see here, outside is full. This one is inside is the full line, and the dotty one's on the outside. Also, of the two shapes inside, you're swapping them over. So you had the circle and the square swapping. Now we've got the triangle and the rectangle swapping. And that's why. For number 8, there's the answer. Right, 9 and 10, we're doing really well, guys. We're so nearly there in this first section. For number 9, you have, again, reflection around the outside. So again, just to draw some key features, you have a square on the outside with a line and the dash, and a square with a dot. If you look, that matches perfectly option E. And so never be afraid to just do a sketch of what you're expecting to see. For number 10, obviously it's D. If we look, we're reflecting in this direction along this axis here. I'll just show you how it looks. Hopefully you can see that it is literally reflection. The only thing that wasn't being reflected was the shading, but in this case there's no shading to be concerned about, making the option very clearly D. So again, here's some of the tips for speeding up. I'm going to jump straight, I think, to this one for the quick answers for part 2. Okay, that's enough. So I'm going to now go through in detail. Obviously, you want some more time on this page, please just pause it here. Otherwise, let's just jump into it. So this is the big practice, 20 questions. Let's run through them nice and speedily. So this is obviously a slightly larger matrices. So the first thing you'll notice is down the columns, the sides are increasing by 1, so 4, 5, 6, but the shading stays the same, making B our answer. This one here, you'll notice it's very much a combination, or the rules for each one stay the same. So in the first column, you need just an arrow. Second column, an arrow and a circle. Third column, 2 arrows and a circle. But in this case, the direction of the arrows is always the same, and you're just adding a shape. So that makes option C our answer. Try and do a bit more hastily for this one, so let's just run through them at speed. So obviously you'll notice in the third column, you need to have 3 circles with 3 lines, whereas it's only 1 line in the first, 2 lines in the second, 3 lines in the third, and the circles need to be the same color. What is also staying consistent is the type of lines. So you've got dotty lines in the bottom, curved lines on top, which means straight lines in the middle. So that makes option 3 our answer. This one, you've actually got sort of a rotation occurring each time. So we have it facing this way, then as you move over, it rotates 45 degrees, and then rotates again 45 degrees here. So if we use that pattern, we can see we're looking for one that's pointing straight up, as we see in option B. So that makes option B the answer. Looking at number 6 again, I always find it's much easier to be able to see it sort of in person. So you can see that the shapes are growing. So you've got a small circle, medium, large. So we needed a small pentagon, then a medium pentagon. And the pentagon needed to be in the same orientation, so pointing upwards. That eliminated a few options. And then in terms of the shape in the middle, there'd be nothing, so that eliminates one option. And we still needed to have the same rotation of left, right, left, right, left, right. Nothing swapped. It was only in the final row that they combined. So we needed the circle on the right and this sort of lollipop on the left, which is what we find in option C. Looking now at number 7. Again, you can see it's a triangle. This time the right angle triangle is rotating round, and it's rotating round clockwise, so it's bottom left, top bottom left, top right is next. So we needed a triangle on the top right hand side, as we saw. And then all other features are staying the same. So the circle would be staying on this side, and the arrow would be staying on this side, which is what we find in option D. Looking then at 8, we've got a duplication of the shape, smaller versions. So we started with a trapezium, then true trapezium. So we wanted to have 2 arrows. And then in terms of the shading, it was just matching the outside line being dotted, the inside being thick and full, which is what we found in option A for 8. For number 9, you can see it's a nice rotation style question where the arrows are all pointing out, which is lovely. So we knew which direction the arrow needed to be, and that allowed us to eliminate quite a few of these options. Actually, if you look, it was only now between D and E. And then in terms of the type of arrow, it needs to be the same as was in the corners, which eliminates option E. Finally then, for 10, you can see here, we've got the same style of diamond, but it needs to have no shading, like all the pattern in the first row, and the dot needs to be on top, which matched option B. Halfway, guys, doing brilliantly. Let's try and see if we can get this done in under an hour and 10. You've been brilliant if you stayed with me the whole time. Thank you so much for watching along. For this one here, you can see very simply it's just the corners of each shape became essentially, or rather, the dots in this rightmost shape became larger and of a scale here. So we needed to have the dots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they're the same dots of the middle shape, just without the connecting lines. And that's what you found in option E. So were I to connect them, I would actually end up with the shape from the middle. That's a nice little way of checking there. Number 12, if I move this in, these are what I sort of describe as sort of composite shapes. You'll notice that the middle shape is only found, also if you look here, so only the white part of the rightmost shape came into the center, and then the arrow from the left came into the center. So we ended up having this diamond shape slanted horizontally. So again, that eliminated A, B, C, and it was just between these two. And if you look, it was a combination of this arrow and this arrow, this arrow and this arrow, which is what resulted in there being 2 arrows. Whereas in this one, when we had an arrow and a circle, it was arrow and circle. So you were copying the arrowheads found here and here to make up your option, which is how we were able to eliminate E, ensuring the answer was C. For 13, again, you can see that we've got a progression series where you've got the same shape, so we knew it had to be an arrow and we knew it had to be pointing up, so that eliminates one option. And then the type of shading had to match all the other types of shading in this central column, so it had no dots and a thick outside line, much like we found in C. For 14, we knew it had to be based upon a circle, and if you look, the number of lines drawn within the shape increases. So we had 1 line drawn, 2 lines drawn, 3 lines drawn, so we were looking for 3 lines drawn, but they needed to share 2 of the same. So we needed to have 1 and 2. As you can see, we had those 2 here, and it just needed a third continuing on the pattern. So the reason it was none of these options is because they didn't share these first 2 lines, which I was to sort of move that here like this. Hopefully you can see those first 2 lines are shared in option B with only let me do it black, only that one black being added, which is why B was our answer. 15, we have a bit of a tough cookie. So all the shapes seem to be arching to the left. We needed to have a triangle like everything else within the row. The triangle needed to have a dot in it. That allowed us to eliminate a couple of the options. We also knew we needed 1 petal, 2 petals, 3 petals, or circles. That allowed us to eliminate these ones. And then finally, between A and E, it was just the fact that that was a circle that eliminated that for us. Then looking at this one here, a bit of a complicated one, but it's not that bad actually, because it is a reflection. And if you look, this shape here is a reflection of this. So that's a nice way of thinking about it. If you sort of were to reflect along that line there, you'd see that this shape being reflected gives us the answer in D. Or again, whether you consider a reflection and this one rotating around 180 degrees, we'll also end up producing this exact same pattern as found in D. For 17, you can see here, this is what I would call a composite shape. The middle column is made by combining the left shape, or the left half of the left shape, with the right half of the right shape to make the middle. So we were simply looking for the left half of this shape. So if you imagine we cut out only this left bit here, you'd end up having a line with a triangle. And that's exactly what we had in E. So the answer came from there. For this one, again, another composite shape where this time the first two columns combine to make the third, but we end up having this middle, also this first column, moving to the middle and becoming black. So we needed to have this bit here was sort of extraneous. That was given by this one. So we want to ignore that and prove everything else, which was just the two lines with the squares on the tips, which is option C. Last page and the last two, so you've done amazingly well, guys. Really proud of you for this. We've blasted through them at a blistering pace. Done 30 matrices questions, can you believe? Right, last little one. Again, a bit of a composite here in terms of the fact that you start off with one shape, then you have another version, and finally you end up with another version, but with an even smaller clone on the very inside. So we simply needed to have a small clone of this original shape, this sort of kite shape on the inside, and that's precisely what you get in option B, where you have the two lines and the small black kite inside. Again, if you look here, that's a square inside, circle inside, square inside, and although this had the kite inside, it didn't have the two lines. That's how we go through that process of eliminating. Last one then for 20. God, this one's a bit of fun. So you'll notice every time you move across a column, you're increasing the number of lines, but you'll notice that the lines, the arrows in opposite corners are always pointing in opposite directions. So in the final one, for example, you've got these two pointing towards each other, and then these two pointing towards each other, so they're not in agreement. So again, we needed to have these two pointing away from each other, these two pointing away from each other, these two pointing away from each other, and these two. The type of dot in the corner needed to be a circle, much as all the others. So if we go through and talk about why we eliminate them, obviously this one here has got the dotted lines in the wrong place, which it shouldn't have. This one here has got all the arrows pointing into the center, whereas instead two of these on the outside, a bit like here, should be pointing away. So it's these arrows that are wrong for C. Again, all pointing to the center and the black dots, and again, the black dots. So that's how we eliminate the options to generate our answer of B. Wow. So those guys are the answers to that last question with some explanations. Thank you so much for watching. Your attention has been really appreciated. I hope that was useful. Again, remember, a lot of the skills that you'll have covered in that section will be useful both in things like sequences. There's a lot of cross-pollination between different topics in nonverbal, and sequences and matrices are very similar in terms of you're often sketching features, you're still eliminating, you're still using your Spanstros that hopefully you've learned really well by now. So it's a fantastic topic to practice and to make sure that you're comfortable with. Obviously, what we've got up next is the second half. It's fold and punch. Fold and punch is one of my favourite topics. I'm going to go through this worked example question with you now. Then, of course, up next, I'll show you the quick mark section, and then we'll go through and do a more detailed rundown of all the questions. But obviously, just be aware for these, it's for week 4. It's in a booklet. Looks a bit like this. You'll know which one it is because it's a bit more papery. It's not a book. It's a booklet. It's something we've obviously printed ourselves. So make sure you've got that out. And I think the page numbers start at 36, but be aware they sort of jump over the place a bit because we've obviously taken different pages from books and put them in an order that makes sense for our purposes. So really make sure you've started on the week 4 or the pages preceding the week 4 sheet. Some other just general tips. If as you're going through these you find these a bit challenging, a simple post-it note, some paper and a hole punch, or even just a paper and like a pencil or something you can get mum and dad to maybe help you make a few holes and actually fold up and see how it works, is really invaluable. And actually getting some physical practice can be really, really useful. So again, a hole punch and just some paper, just some simple paper. Post-it notes work brilliantly. You can fold them, hole punch it, then unfold it and see what the pattern is. And getting some hands-on experience with these, I know, can really make it click for some people. So that's just one thing that you may want to do really at any point throughout this lesson if it helps you. How I would do it without any of those aids, have a look. So we do this first worked example, is I'm always working backwards. So I know here is where I start, and I want to go back in reverse order. So I'm looking at the last, or the second to the last fold, in this case, the last fold. So this is what we ended up with. And the fold before that was along this line here. So I'm going to want to sketch myself where those dots will be. So obviously if I'm putting a hole here and I'm opening it up, I'm going to get a reflection along that line. So if I do the dots in blue, you can see that my blue dots are being reflected across the red line. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to sketch where I expect to see them. So there and there. I then go back again. I look at the next fold. In this case, it's this one along here. And again, this is going to be my reflection upon which this mirror image effect is going to happen. So now I know where the line is. I want to do a reflection along this line here. So I need to sketch out a mirror image, and I'm going to have 2 dots close to the line and 2 dots further from the line. And they're going to be perfectly in line with each other. I must admit my sketch is imperfect, but perfectly in line with each other. And from here already, we can eliminate a load of options. So right off the bat, this first step, B was wrong. I think E is wrong as well because they've not got the first step correct. And then based on this second step, we can see that both A and C are also wrong. So we can eliminate those options. And D is the only one that even remotely resembles our answer. So the answer is D. And so I do recommend, again, there's a lot of identifying reflections in this because you're reflecting how things have been reflected. And again, it's always a reflection along the last fold line. So we did this one first. So maybe if I do some more color coding. Here's my reflection line. We do the purple reflection line first. Then we reflect along this larger line. And if you do that, you end up with the answer. So I love fold and punch because you can get there, you can get really good, a bit of sketching, a bit of doodling, and you can have a really precise answer. So if you want to see the quick answers, here they come. Sorry, I should have given you a pre-warning, but here they are. By all means, pause it on this page if you just simply want to whiz through and mark it. But if you want a more detailed run through where I actually sort of draw the sketch for each of the answers, stick around and we'll do that now. And a final hint I forgot to mention just before we get into the answers as well. Origami, folding paper aeroplanes, making ducks, swans, boxes, all sorts of things. Really nice and fun way to practice these. So if you do come to the section, you're still finding these a little bit tricky, don't be afraid to go online. There's all sorts of fantastic guides. I know to build the cranes and the swans are really interesting. Or paper airplanes if you're at home. It's a nice little way of, both relaxing, having some fun, unwinding, but also actually getting some quite valuable practice because it just helps you realize how the folding works. So just one recommendation, go out there, fold some planes, fold some cranes, fold some swans. And if you do create any amazing bits of origami, please do take a photo, email them into us. We love to see your creations. I know last year we had some fantastic things made, some really complicated ones towards the end. So again, it does help. It does count both as fun and practice. And any opportunity that we have at Teacher Right, like with reading, for example, which is both really beneficial and really fun, we advise you do that because again, we want this to be an enjoyable process. Sorry, last little thing. Now let's jump straight into the answers. So looking at number 1 here, you can see there's obviously 2 fold lines, but again, I'm following my rule. I'm doing it in reverse order. I'm going along this line first, so that will leave me with a dot here, and then I'm folding along this line second, and then those 2 dots will be reflected up here. So I've got one that looks like this. And if we compare that, again, I should only have 4 dots, so that's going to let me to eliminate a couple of these options straight away. Again, so that's one thing, counting as well, very clear way of just immediately eliminating answers. And now, of course, I think very clearly that D and B don't match up with the sketch, and so we eliminate them. Number 2, again, let's do it in order. So this was the most recent fold, so we've got to do that fold there. It's going to give me a dot out here, like this. Ooh, let's just make it a bit louder so it's clear. So a dot like this, there, nice and enlarged. And then of course this fold going along here, 1, 2, 3, and that's going to reflect these shapes. So again, if in doubt, it's always worth, again, you can do it just pencil ruler. There's my line of reflection. So this one is going to be quite close to the line, so my reflected dot should be somewhere along here, whereas this line to the line is much further. Remember, we're doing it to the black line now, so this needs to be reflected much, much further out. And if these are in a line along the edge, these will be along the line on the edge. That's one of the patterns you can spot. So again, if I now were to sort of ignore and get rid of those lines, that's the kind of dot pattern we're looking for. Again, very easy to get rid of A, C, and E, and then even D and E as well, because only B is even close to being correct. And again, hopefully you can see how the sketch just really gives you that format and hopefully really speeds you up. Number 3, so again, doing the folds in reverse order. That fold will mirror this dot from here to here. So I've got another one up here. And then this fold along the edge will mirror all of them. So I have to draw the line down. There's my reflection line. I've got obviously this one that will be close by. This one will be close by. This one will be further away. And this one will be further away. So we should have this pattern of dots. And if we look very clearly, you can see sort of we've got a sort of hexagon shape there. Oh, there's our little hexagon of dots with 2 extra ones at the bottom. That makes E. Excuse me. That makes E our answer. And again, don't be afraid to sketch patterns like this to help you recognize whatever kind of assets or whatever kind of thing you can do to help trigger your pattern recognition. It's worth doing. So sketch away. Please don't be afraid to write on top of things. So that's E is our answer. Again, if you wanted to, you could also eliminate things based on them not being in the correct position. So missing these two dots, for example, missing the two central dots in B, missing the two side dots in C, and in D, again, we're missing the two central dots. There's nothing here, it should be. For example, that's another way of doing it. Right, number 4 gets a bit more interesting because we've got arrows and dots. Just remember that arrows or non-spherical objects, they will have direction. So in this case, if this arrow is being pointing that direction, when I reflect it, I'm going to have to consider the new direction it's pointing in. So since I'm doing this one first, again, I'm going to have this dot reflected from here to here. And with the triangle, it matters how we consider what it's pointing at. So for example, I notice this, if I consider it in this direction, it's pointing sort of up towards the circle, so I still need to maintain that. But it's also, and you can see this as well, pointing in this direction. So again, do consider this carefully, and as long as you're consistent, and you'll see that hopefully the triangles that I can draw is the same. So on my image, on my reflection, if I've got a triangle pointing up like that, so I can see, yep, that point is still pointing in towards the line and up towards the circle. Well, when I draw my mirror image, it needs to be the same. So again, pointing in towards the center and up towards the circle. And that makes it a proper mirror image. So for example, D is an obvious one to discount because look, both arrows are now pointing in the same direction. Well, that's certainly not allowed. E is not allowed because it's moved wildly out of position and it's not the circle where it should be. And in fact, B can be eliminated as well because again, that circle's in the wrong place. So now down to just 2 options. So again, I need to do one more reflection. So that's now across this line. Again, I'm going to have a duplicate where I've got these little triangles pointing in towards each other and these dots in the corners. And again, my sketches aren't perfect, but they never are. We're not paid to be artists, we're paid to get the answer correct. And what I can tell is from the position of these dots down here, that it's these dots are in the incorrect position, which makes A our correct answer. Looking at number 5, again, we've got a case of triangles and dots. This is the line that we're doing first. This is our first reflection. So these triangles that are pointing outwards are still going to be pointing outwards, but in the other direction. So that's not a bad triangle there, and that's not a bad triangle there. But again, this bottom triangle is pointing at this circle, so this triangle also will need to be pointing at the circle. Now, interesting, this final reflection here is only going to duplicate this much, or everything that's within these 2 rows. So just to show you that, and actually when I sketch it, I'll do a different color. We're not going to copy the top 2 triangles, but this row here will be copied. So we've got this one, and this one, and that. So that is our completed shape. And you can see here that's very clearly D, not C, not B because the directions. A doesn't have the bottom, and E is all sorts of mess. I'm not sure what they've done there. Number 6. Oh, sorry, no, not number 6. That's now the end of the first section, section 5. So again, just to recap, here are the answers for the first 5. So it's sort of the warm-up questions. So there they are, if you want to just recap them. Next, we're going to go on and go through and do the exact same thing, but for the timed test. Now, remember with the timed test, and it's worth saying this now, if because of timing reasons you didn't finish the timed test, I would suggest you pause the video here and you finish it, please. Because I would much rather you attempt all the questions before I explain them than you just say, oh, I ran out of time, I'm not going to bother. It's always better to get that practice. Now you can still give yourself maybe only half the marks for the bits that were over time, extra time, and that'll reflect sort of improvements to be made. But I still want you to have that experience, that practice. So please, if there's any questions you didn't even attempt, go attempt them now. Otherwise, let's go into it. Right, so that's long enough for those to pause. Let's get going. So here we have number 1. So again, now we're mixing up. We've got hearts and triangles. So there's a few more directional things to consider when we're doing our reflections. Again, though, we're going to do it in the same order. So this is the first fold. So I want to reflect this down here. And this heart is going to be pointing in towards the corner. So my heart's going to look something like this. And then this triangle is pointing out towards the edge. So this triangle also needs to be pointing out towards this edge. And that's a pretty good reflection, as sketches go at least. Again, now we've got this line to reflect along the center. So this is going to be duplicated along that line. And again, these 2 triangles now going to be on the top, again, still pointing out towards the line. These triangles are going to be duplicated, pointing out. I think just on those 2 triangle positions alone, actually, we can eliminate B, C, and D, and we're down to 50-50. So let's just really quickly consider the heart direction pointing up to the top corner. So we're going to have 2 hearts pointing to this corner. So I'm just going to draw sort of the directional bit of the heart so I can add on the bump at the end. And now if we compare our sketch, you can see that it's this heart position here that makes it incorrect. And actually also this triangle position here, whereas it should be heart, heart, which is what we have in A. Okay, number 2. So again, let's follow the folds. So we've got this larger fold first. Okay, so we're sort of reflecting along this line. So all of this is going to be reflected along that line, along that fold there. So I'm going to have a heart pointing inwards here. I'm going to have this triangle pointing up, and underneath it a circle. So that's enough to start us already. That might be able to limit things. It does. It eliminates D because of this heart here. It eliminates C because that's not a heart there. It eliminates B because there's too much information. Doesn't eliminate A yet, so let's keep going. This fold's going to be really interesting though, because now what we're doing is we're going to be copying everything that's on this outside edge only. So if you think about having a line here, obviously these are already done. So it's just this fold along here is just going to copy whatever was in that corner. And I believe what is in that corner will just be based on these two here. So I should have a circle. And if that's pointing up that way, when it's reflected, it'll be pointing off this way. So circle and triangle. And let me just try and eliminate. And yes, if you look, A down here, it's got the 2 hearts, which is not what we said. So A is eliminated, meaning our answer of E still stands. Oh, hey. Okay, moving on, we've got 3. So again, we start with the heart. We do this fold first, so the heart's going to be reflected, and it's going to be pointing actually towards this corner again, so that's pointing in that way. So this heart's going to be pointing in that direction. Again, draw the arrows and then add on the little hearty bit at the end. Not my best drawing, but it'll do. Now I'm going to fold across this line here. So now these are going to get copied, so I'm going to have another heart in the same direction underneath. If this one's pointing towards that point, I have another heart pointing up towards it here. So again, draw the directional part first. So that's our first setup, and actually that's going to allow us to eliminate, I think, D. It's going to allow us to eliminate B because of this one, and allow us to eliminate, A as well. So it's still not a bad run. And the last bit is going to reflect it along this line here. So if these are pointing, so again, if this is the now central line here, if these are pointing away, well, these will be pointing away. And if these both are pointing down, they will actually still be pointing down. If this one's pointing up, it'll still be pointing up. So that should be the shape. And if we look here, the problem with E is the fact that these two are the wrong direction, which means that C, is our answer. Number 4. Okay, so we've got these two here. So let's just do the reflections. That will be pointing up. This will still be pointing in the same direction, like that. Okay, then we've got this reflection here. So again, copy this. If these two are still going to be pointing in the same direction. My heart drawing skills are not improving, but it's enough for me to get the answers. Again, these two will be pointing in towards one another, so I need to have the same shape mirrored down here. And the last fold is just to duplicate that little edge, so all of these are going to be duplicated, so I'm going to have a heart pointing the opposite way for all of them. So I'm struggling now to draw these hearts. So let's do it. It'll be pointing in, pointing in, pointing in, pointing in. And we just add on a little hearty bit. You know what? I think I'm just going to recommend for these, not least because we don't need it. I'm just going to draw the directional part of the heart and leave it there because I'm still just thinking, what are the hearts facing? Obviously, A gets eliminated because it's got too much, too little. B because it's got too much. D, the direction of these are in the wrong direction, therefore pointing this way, so that means it's not D. And E is close to being correct, but I think the error lies with these two that should not be pointing away from each other, but should be pointing towards each other, so that's why not E. And C is our answer. Number 5, we got going back to the good old-fashioned dot ones. So this fold here is going to copy everything within this triangle. Again, if you think that triangle there is going to copy that triangle's worth there, which only actually contains that one dot. So the first bit of drawing is going to look like this, as we unfold that bit there. The next fold is going to copy, well, this triangle worth of folding is going to duplicate whatever's here. So I guess we have a dot here. So that's it now onto total picture. And then this one will copy everything that's there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And so our answer should match quite closely to B. And actually, if you look, that's nearly a perfect match. If B is slightly better drawn than my sketch. That's our answer. Number 6, again, we've got some shapes with this one here. Going to copy everything within that square. So if that triangle is pointing up, this triangle is going to be pointing across. So let's map that onto our drawing. And with this one, we're just going to copy everything within that space there, because again, there's your reflection line. And so only these two shapes here are going to be copied, so I'd expect to see it pointing outwards and still pointing upwards. Out and up. So then, that leaves us with, well, it can't be E because of these, too many shapes. Can't be D because of the heart. Can't be C because these are pointing towards one another. And then it can't be B again because of that heart in the corner. Leaving as A is the only answer. Number 7. This fold first, making it look like this, pointing that direction. And then these two folds, making it point out again. Making it match with D. Number 8, got this little fold first. That's going to copy everything above it, which happens to include that triangle there. Excuse me, no, sorry, no, not along that line. That's already there. It's along that line is our first fold. You can just tell which of the folds are because the arrows. So it's going to duplicate this one up here to start with. So that's based on that line. Then we've got this fold here. Which is going to cross that line, which is going to copy just again everything within that square. So you had a triangle pointing this way. Sorry, no, pointing up. A triangle pointing up. It's going to be pointing out like this. Let's fill it in on the master copy. And then this one here will copy everything within that box. Okay, you know, so I like to sort of sketch out the box of things that are included for the more complicated ones. In this case, it's going to result with this arrow going downwards again, and this arrow coming up again. So these two should be pointing towards each other. So that eliminates C. There shouldn't be one arrow on the base. That eliminates E. Should be pointing to the right. That eliminates D. Again, sorry, one arrow on the base. That eliminates A as well. So then B is our answer. Got number 9 here. So this fold first. We have a triangle in this corner, heart in this corner. The heart drawing still lack, but we're getting there. And that's actually probably going to eliminate this one here because of that. No, it definitely is. Then we can do this fold up here into that corner. So that's going to copy everything that's there. So we need to have triangle in this corner. We need to have hearts pointing in these directions. But notice how it's missing this empty space here. So we're only going to copy everything that's within that blue box, which is why this triangle doesn't get copied up to here. And instead what happens on the last fold, we're copying that this heart that's here, and we're copying it into that corner. It's pointing up towards that corner. So if I do a sketch, it should look like this. I put that there. Something into that. So again, that's why for this one it is. Oh, there's not one, but there's no example of a triangle there. But that's why it is E, where you've got these 4 hearts pointing in different directions, 3 triangles pointing towards the center, and the top left corner being replaced with that heart there. Number 10. So here's the first fold. So it's going to mirror everything within this zone here, which is these 2 triangles. So I want to see 2 triangles like this. That eliminates D and E. Then this one here, this corner. So we get this triangle being copied down into the bottom. That's going to have it looking like this and this. And then this last corner up here, again, reflecting this triangle. So that it goes from looking like that, again pointing up, so they're pointing across, like this. If I was to overlap both of these on top of each other, which I can do things like this, and this, you can see we actually have a pretty good drawing of our answer. So the 4 arrows pointing in different directions, and then both these arrows pointing inwards. So nope, not A. And again, these are pointing outwards, so not C. B is our answer. Doing really well, guys. We just got up to question 15, so the end is in sight. So for this one, we're going to just duplicate this triangle of information here. So it's this heart that's going to get copied over. Then we're eliminating, then we're reflecting this triangle here along that line. So these two hearts need to be duplicated along the side. They'll be facing towards this side, so facing inwards. Like these two. And then we're just going to reflect along this line here, which will duplicate everything in that top bar, which is duplicating these two. So again, they're going to be pointing upwards. Like that. And if we match that, that matches really clearly with C. 12, again, let's do the first one first. So this line here, it's going to duplicate everything that shows up here and here. In that case, it's this information, so these two triangles are going to be duplicated here. Then this fold, which will duplicate everything within that zone, which is to say, I believe, all 3 of these triangles again, but along this diagonal, so to draw that over. So that's going to look like that arrow pointing up, that arrow pointing up, these two pointing in towards each other. So we should have here 2 triangles pointing in towards each other. And the last little bit is going to just duplicate this box here, which is going to duplicate these 2. So we should have another copy of these 2 pointing in towards each other. Like that. And that then should match with, quite definitely, option E down there. Look. Okay, moving on. For this one, we're going to first off have this box here reflected. That's going to put a heart facing in this direction, leading downwards. Then we're going to have this bit reflected here, which is going to include, obviously, just the 2 hearts here. So we have 2 hearts pointing upwards. A bit like that. And then we're going to reflect, let's do another colour, this bit here in green, which will obviously include everything within here. So everything within that zone is going to be these 2 hearts here. So you're going to, with these 2 hearts reflected up into that top corner, facing opposite directions. Not the best heart drawing, but it does the job, and I think then that matches quite definitely with option C. So C is your answer. Well done if you got 13. Number 14, always a funny one, these, just to make sure. So lots of sketching done. So this one, first off, the heart's going to be pointing upwards. I might even just check here to see. Yep. No, so C is immediately gone. So you see how these 2 here look, pointing in the same direction. That's not the case, so we can get rid of one right off the bat. Then we got these 2 being copied over. So again, I'm going to have this pointing up and then pointing down. Just to make it very easy for myself, I'm just going to keep it as arrows because it's the direction of the heart that matters. So up, then down. So if you look here, we've got 2 that are wrong. So E's wrong. Up, down, correct. Up, down, up, down. Okay, we're getting there, making progress each time. Then we've got this fold here, which obviously is going to copy everything. So we need to have, again, pointing in opposite directions here and here. Opposite directions here and here. This is going to show you how the sketching can work if you're not trying to draw the full-on hearts. And so B here, look, these are pointing in towards each other, so it can't be B, which is fine. And then finally, we need to copy it over onto here. And actually, if you look, again, we're just going to have all these in the same direction, so they should all be complete images. Where on each row, you've got a row pointing up, a row pointing down, a row pointing up, a row pointing down. So pointing up, pointing down, pointing up, pointing down. But D, look, they've messed around with it here. And so D is wrong because of the inaccuracies with all of these. So for 14, the answer is A. So actually 14, although it looks a bit more complicated, can actually, I think, be a little bit easier, which is lovely. Very last question then, so we're doing really nicely. For this one here, we've obviously got this fold along this triangle here. So it's going to copy one triangle worth, which includes this one here. So we're going to end up having this pointing in against itself here. Is very strange. If you look here, I've got a red dot that I'm making red to stand out. But this dot doesn't show up in any later pictures. So this is something that's been added at a later date. And now this is quite abnormal. I think they've done it for question 15 just to show you sort of a different sort of question. But if this hole was here, and we could see it here, when this bit gets folded over, we would know that it was in this shape here, but it's not. So in our final picture, when we unravel it, there will be a hole here. But it's not a hole that's being repeated, because I say otherwise you'd be able to see through and there'd be a gap in our picture down here. So they're sort of adding a punch or revealing that there is a punch there midway through the folding process, which I say is very unusual. What they're actually doing is when they do this fold here, they're then hole punching it. So it'll affect this fold, but none of the ones after, which is quite interesting. So I think number 15 is a bit of a fun one to just think about, and so that's why I'm just highlighting you to focus on this circle and why it isn't in a different place. But if we carry on and do the rest, so that circle is going to be there in the last picture, but it's not going to affect or be affected by this fold here, this triangular fold, because I say if it was, we could see through there, we'd be able to see through a gap there. But that does mean everything else within there, which is this heart, will be reflected out. So we're expecting to see a heart pointing upwards like this, because it's being reflected along that line within that triangle on one of these. Again, there is, bear in mind, there is no red circle there for that purpose. So we unfold it. We have place that shape. So then the last line we have to do is to reflect along here. And that's now will include everything within this triangle that gets reflected. So we need to have these two triangles that are pointing towards each other and these two hearts that are pointing away from each other. And the two hearts are going to be on top, pointing away from one another. And these two triangles down here pointing in towards each other. And that part is so far so fine, but the thing that will also be there, which is strange, is of course by putting this hole punch here, when it's folded in half, when you unfold it in this direction, you will get another hole here. That was just the strange one to think about actually when you do the hole punching. And this one, certainly of all the ones, might be worth, if you do a fold, then punch it, then do another fold, and then punch it, how does that affect where they show up? Because this one, if you're going to do any of these as a trial run, and if you can't obviously do heart hole punches, that's fine. You can just do normal standard holes just to see how it affects the order. But that does mean, in fact, the answer for the final question is D. Which I say is very interesting. Right, everyone. That is the end of the homework review. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that was useful. Obviously, any questions, bring them to your tutors for the next session. But other than that, guys, I'll finish here and just say thank you so much, and I will see you next week. All the best, everybody. Bye-bye.